welcome to Beyond at Home. We are your hosts. I'm Emma. This is Chris. We're here to give you a bit of a rundown of what you're about to see.
In this episode of Beyond at Home, we're going to look at what our waves and our words have in common. And by the time we're done here, you'll have 3 simple ways that you can harness the power of your words. And bonus, people might even learn how to surf from our very special guest communicator, Jason Perkins.
You might get that out of it. You may not, but if you want to get involved, feel free to get involved in the comments, say hello, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube, and stay up to date with what we've got going on.
And if you are brand new, first of all, thanks so much for stopping by. We want to let you know that at Beyond, we want to create a church that unchurched people love to attend. So if you're new to faith or coming back to faith for the very first time, we really hope that what you're about to see will be helpful for you as you take your next step on your journey. But otherwise, sit back, relax.
Enjoy. We'll see you soon.
Welcome to Church Online or Beyond at Home. I'm so grateful that Chris has allowed me to take over his kitchen for today. My name's Jason Perkins, and I have the privilege of being a part of a network of churches called the Irresistible Churches Network here in Australia, where we are trying to create a network of churches that are focused on creating churches that unchurched people love to engage with, which is what I love about Beyond Church. If you're familiar with Beyond, then you know that this is a different kind of church where we're creating a church that even people that don't normally go to church would love to attend. If you're brand new to Beyond, or maybe you just stumbled across this video online somehow, we are pumped that you chose to be with us today for part 2 of this series called Me and My Big Mouth, where we're talking all things about our mouths and our words and the power that they have in our lives. So we're going to dive straight in today. I've got a confession to make. I am a wannabe surfer. Now, as you listen to my accent, you're going to discover that I was originally born in Australia, but I spent a lot of time living overseas, primarily in the United States, where I picked up what I like to refer to as the Russell Crowe version of the Australian accent. It means I spent way too much time living in the States. But when I got back to Australia last year, I had one very large goal. I wanted to do something I never did when I was a child, and that was learn to surf. So late January of this year, right before the COVID pandemic hit, I began to learn how to surf. In fact, as luck would have it, I actually have a surfboard here in the kitchen with me today. And you might be wondering, why in the world would you have a surfboard in the kitchen? Well, it's because I brought it in here a moment ago to talk about it during this talk today. I brought the surfboard in because I want you to know I've become an avid surfer over the last few months. I'm not good at it, but I go out and I try to catch waves regularly. One of the things that I've learned very quickly as I've learned to surf is that waves are incredibly powerful. They will knock you off your feet. They will knock you on your butt. If you don't pay attention to waves, they have the power to literally knock you over. And so as we dive into part 2 of this series today, Me and My Big Mouth, I see a direct correlation between our words and waves. Just like waves are incredibly powerful, our words are incredibly powerful as well. By the end of our talk today, here's my goal. I want to give you some simple things, in fact, 3 simple truths that will help you harness the power of your words. As a bonus, if you're a surfer or even not a surfer, maybe a wannabe surfer like me, I'm also going to let you know how you can harness the power of waves on a surfboard. Now, before we get to all of that, let me do a quick recap of what Chris went over in part 1 of this series, Me and My Big Mouth. So let's take a look at that right now. All right, so last week, we learned a lot from Chris about our words and our mouths. So last week, we learned the importance that it's way more important for us to make things right than to be right. Let me say that again. It's so much more important for us to make things right with people than to be right all the time. But let's be honest. We all have this same problem. Whether you're a church person or not a church person, when we get into conversations, we oftentimes are thinking about what we want to say next rather than really listening to the person that we're talking with. I know that's a massive problem for me in conversations. I have to constantly remind myself, don't think, Jason, of what you want to respond with or what you want to say next, be willing to really listen to the person you're having a conversation with. We learned last week this simple principle, and we even learned these hand motions that I think are so powerful. We need to be quick to listen, and slow to speak. Let me say that again. Quick to listen, slow to speak. One of the powerful tools that I've used personally that's been so helpful in conversation is the 3-to-1 ratio. I want to listen 3 times more than I'm speaking. So the 3-to-1 ratio reminds me if I'm having an hour-long conversation with someone, then I should only be speaking about 15 minutes of the time. The other 45 minutes, I should be quick to listen, slow to speak. It's such an important principle for us to understand, to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Why is that so important? Here's why this is so important. Words are incredibly powerful. In fact, like waves and words have incredible power to either delight or destroy. Let me say that again. Waves and words have incredible power to either delight or destroy. Think about a wave for a second. It can be delightful. If you're on a surfboard riding a wave, there's nothing more delightful than that. But a tsunami wave can literally destroy an entire city. We've all seen it on the news before when a tsunami hits the coastline of a country and destroys an entire city. Waves, like words, have the power to either delight or destroy. That's why it's so important for us to take a look at what we're going to look at today, the power of harnessing our words for good rather than to destroy. In fact, words have a lot of weight to them, but not all words are weighted equally. In fact, let me illustrate for you really quickly with something that I have over here. It'll just take me a second to go grab it. So I brought with me some actual weights today, and I'll try not to smash Chris's glass table as I put them down. Some of the weights are lighter in weight, like this 3 kilo weight. Some of them are a little bit heavier, like the 5 kilo, and even heavier again, like this 10 kilo. Weights are similar to words. They all have different weights to them. When you think of words, there are some words that are more weightier than others. For example, when you think of words that are positive, they actually are not as weighty as words that are negative. If you don't believe me, you got to Google it. Search up the power of negative versus positive words. You'll actually find that negative words are far more powerful than positive words in our lives. Think about it. Words come to you. In fact, words like waves are oftentimes even spoken over you in your life. And negative words have far more weight and stay with you far longer than positive words. That's why it's always a good idea to share more positive words in a conversation than you do negative words, because the power is different between those two. The other thing that makes words different is that they're weighted depend on who is delivering the words. Think about this for a second. If somebody is an influencer in your life, the weight of their words are far more powerful than somebody that's just a casual acquaintance. For instance, the weight of your parents' words to you and over you in your life have incredible power and weight. Something your father or your mother says will stay with you for the rest of your life, as opposed to just a casual acquaintance that you run into in the street. You may not remember the words that they say to you years from now. If you're a boss, you actually have incredible weight with your words in the workplace. When you walk into the conference room, you sit down for a conversation, your words have far more weight, like this 10 kilo barbell, than say this 3 kilo one. Remember that when you're in a conversation in the workplace, your role in the workplace has a significant factor on the weight of your words. Not only that, words have different weightings when it comes to recovery as well. Much like a workout, if I work out with this 10 kilo weight, my recovery after a really hard workout with this weight is going to be much longer than my recovery after this 3 kilo weight workout. Think about it. Days later, my arms will still be sore from working out with the 10 kilo weight as opposed to this 3 kilo weight. My arms maybe won't even notice recovery at all. The same is true with your words. Your negative words and the power of your words have different rates of recovery to them. That's why sometimes when you have a tough conversation with someone or you say something you wish you had never said, you tell them that you're sorry, but it takes more time than others for them to recover from the words that have been spoken to them and over them. Sometimes I'm sorry doesn't mean that we can get right back to normal. In fact, you've probably experienced when you've been having a conversation and you said you were sorry and you think to yourself, I just wish we could get back to fill in the blank. That's because words are weighted differently, both positive and negative, influences and acquaintances, and different weights of recovery as well. So when it comes to our words, that truth that we learned last week is so powerful. We've got to be quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. That truth came from a famous guy with an even more famous brother, a guy named James living in the first century who had a famous brother whose name was Jesus. And in this letter that he wrote to Christians in the Roman Empire in the first century, he introduced us to this truth, to be quick to listen and slow to speak. He also introduced us to how we can actually harness the power of our words. And I want us to take a look at that part of the letter right now. All right, let's settle in and take a look at this letter that Jesus' brother James wrote to those Christians living in the first century. We'll pick up the story in James chapter 3. At the beginning of the chapter, he said these words, "Dear brothers, don't be too eager to tell others their faults." Reminding us, be quick to listen, slow to speak. He goes on to say, here's the reason we don't want to be too quick with telling others their faults. He says, for we all, that means everybody, whether you're new to church or you've been in church your whole life, whether you're a guy or a girl, whether you're old or young, makes no difference. James says, for we all make many mistakes. Let's be honest. I don't think any of us would disagree with James. We do. We all make a ton of mistakes, myself included. And then he goes on and gives a special warning to those people like me who are teachers of religion. He says, when we, teachers of religion, who should know better, do wrong, our punishment will be greater than it would be for others. That's a special warning for those that are teachers of religion or pastors or teachers like myself. When we do something wrong, those of us who should know better, we actually will receive a greater punishment than other people. Now, James goes on to begin teaching us how we can harness the power of our words. If anyone can control his tongue, he goes on to write, it proves that he has the power to control his entire body. In fact, James said it this way. It proves if you can control your tongue, it proves that you have perfect control over himself in every other way. In other words, James is saying this, you get power to control your tongue, you actually have power to control your whole body. In fact, James goes on to give us some interesting illustrations of this truth. He steals a line or really steals an idea from his brother Jesus by sharing with us a parable. A parable is simply a story with a double meaning, a meaning that has earthly value and a meaning that also has heavenly value or spiritual value as well. He uses, just like Jesus used to, some agricultural stories to help them understand exactly what he was saying. These were people of both land and sea, so he gives them a story of both land and sea. James says these words in verse 3. He says, we can make a large horse turn around and go wherever we want by means of a small bit in its mouth. Notice the contrasting story here, or the contrasting concepts that he used. He says a large horse can be controlled by a small bit. So there's these large objects that are being controlled by a small object. He gives another scenario and says, and a tiny rudder makes a huge ship turn wherever the pilot wants it to go, even though the winds are strong. Notice again the contrasting language. A tiny rudder can control a huge ship and allow the pilot to take it wherever he wants it to go, even though the winds are incredibly strong. Then James ties in these stories to their relationship with our tongues. So also the tongue is a small thing, but what enormous damage it can do. A great forest can be set on fire by one tiny spark, and the tongue is a flame of fire. It is full of wickedness and poisons every part of the body. And the tongue is set on fire by hell itself and can turn our whole lives into a blazing flame of destruction and disaster. James gives us this illustration of a tiny flame setting an entire forest on fire. We've all seen the bushfires in our own country here in Australia. Oftentimes we watch on the news entire portions of our country on fire because of a bushfire that was started by one tiny little arson flame. So it is with the tongue. The tongue is tiny, but it has huge power to destroy people's lives. James goes on and says, men have trained or can train every kind of animal or bird that lives and every kind of reptile and fish. But then listen in carefully. Lean into this next line from James. He says, although we've been able to tame and train every kind of bird and every kind of animal and fish, no human being can tame the tongue. It is always ready to pour out the deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Heavenly Father, and sometimes it breaks out into curses against men who are made in the image of God. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouths. Dear brothers, surely this is not right. Does a spring of water bubble out first with fresh water and then with bitter water? Can you pick olives from a fig tree or figs from a grapevine? No, James says. And you can't draw fresh water from a salty pool. It's almost like James goes on to tell us the incredible destruction of what the power of our words and our tongues can do to our lives and the lives of others. He talks about these different concepts. He says a huge ship can be guided, can be controlled, can be harnessed by a tiny little rudder. It reminds me of my surfboard. A surfboard, in a sense, is kind of like a ship, in a sense. It's a watercraft. It carries people on the water. Just like a ship, a surfboard can be controlled by something tiny. This little fin on the back of my surfboard actually has the power to harness the power of the wave and allow you to control where this board takes you on the water. The same is true with our tongue. If you can harness the power of your tongue, you can allow it to do great good in the world and bring great delight instead of destroying people's lives. But James doesn't really give us a solution to how to harness our tongue. He just says it can't be tamed. It can't be harnessed. In fact, he gives us a litany of stories of destruction. But I want to give us 3 simple ideas of how we can potentially harness the power of our tongue. We may never be able to tame our tongue, but we may be able to harness its power. The first thing I think we have to do is we have to just surrender. Surrender to the fact that we can't tame our tongue. We can't do it. But we need to also remember the fact that our words are powerful. When we remember the weight and the power of our words, and we surrender to the fact that we can't tame our tongue, that's going to allow us, those 2 things, when we remember and surrender, it will allow us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Finally, we'll all mess up. Every single one of us, myself included. James actually told us we all make mistakes. So after we remember and after we surrender, we have to also confess when we make mistakes. Don't try to give an explanation for your mistake with your tongue. Don't try to make excuses for what you did with your tongue. Just confess and admit that you messed up, because that's what we all do. So remember, surrender, and confess. Remember the power of your words. Surrender your tongue to God, because no one can tame them. And then finally, confess when we make mistakes. That will allow us to begin to harness the power of our tongues in our lives. Now, to wrap up, I want you to imagine for a second. Imagine for a moment. Imagine you're a dad. Imagine the power of your words over your children's lives. Imagine if you harness your tongue, the difference that it can make in their life instead of the destruction. Imagine if you're a mom watching this today, the power of your words to your husband, your children, the people you interact with. Imagine the difference it would make in your life, in the lives of those around you, if you harness the power of your tongue. If you're a child, if you're a student, if you're a teacher, if you're an employee or an employer, I don't know what walk of life you find yourself in right now, but imagine the difference that you can make if you harness the power of your tongue to bring delight instead of destruction. Your words are powerful, like waves. They have incredible power to bring delight or destruction, and you have the power to harness your tongue. Okay, so imagine for a second. Just imagine it's Monday morning and you're a dad. What do you do with what you've heard today? If you're a dad, you need to remember your words carry incredible weight and power over your children's lives. If you're a mom, the same is true. In fact, your weight of words as a mom is incredibly powerful, not just over your children's lives, but also over your husband or your spouse's life as well. If you're a boss, your words carry incredible weight also. If you're a student or a teacher or an employee, no matter who it is, I want you on Monday morning to remember the power of your words. That's the first thing. Remember the weight of your words. Number two, surrender your tongue. No one can tame their tongue. That's what James taught us. But we can surrender the power of our tongue to God and allow Him to harness it for us. And after you remember and surrender, I want to encourage you on Monday and every day this week, when you make a mistake, which we all will, I will, you will, we all will. None of us are exempt. Don't make an excuse or try to explain the mistake away. Confess it. When you remember, surrender, and confess, you'll begin to be able to see the power of harnessing your tongue.
Sticking around to the end and for joining us for another Beyond at Home. We really hope that was useful to you. And if you want to find out a little bit more about Beyond, if maybe this has kind of piqued your interest, like our Instagram or like our Facebook, and stay up to date with what we've got going down.
And if you're wondering, hey, what's another next step if maybe you want to get to know some people, we know that at this time it's really, really important to stay connected relationally, even though there are still restrictions on social distancing. The easiest way to get connected relationally is to fill out a virtual connect card that'll pop up in the comments, or simply type the word connect below and one of our team will get you connected into the community here at Beyond. Other than that, we would love to invite you back next week for part 3 of Me and My Big Mouth. Riley's going to be here. It's going to be a hoot of a time.
Can't wait.
We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.
This is Do It Again by Elevation Worship. Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence, you never failed me yet. I know the night won't last, your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praises. Jesus, you're still in love, keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. This is Every Little Thing by Hillsong Young and Free. Your favor waits within the future. My dreams are small compared to yours. Why should I worry about tomorrow when I know that all I've got to do is trust you, Lord? 'Cause every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. 'Cause every little thing, everything will be alright. Behind the scenes and in the details, you plan the perfect way for me. Why would I dwell upon the road's uncertainties when all I've got to do is look to you? Yeah, all I've got to do